We are going to use Excel here to find confidence intervals. Now, before we jump into the data and calculate the confidence intervals, I just want to remind us what a confidence interval is. So with a confidence interval, we are going to have a lower bound and an upper. And basically we're saying like, I don't know, maybe 3 to 5. Like, so if 3 is the lower bound and 5 is the upper, we could be 90% confident that it's between 3 and 5. Like, that's the idea of the confidence interval. And so to do that, we generally need to find our margin of error. We have to find our mean. We have to find a few different things first. So we're going to use this made up data of 24 pieces of data, right? 2 years of days off. So to do this, I'm going to say, well, I can find the mean. I'm going to go ahead and find the standard deviation. Let's go ahead and I'm going to go ahead and find the sample size. Okay. Now, I've already said that the sample size we know is 24 because it's 2 years. If you don't know that, let's pretend you don't know. For the sample size, you can use the count feature and just highlight all of these, and it'll tell you there are 24. So if you ever don't know, you can just put in your list of data, it'll count for you. Now for the mean of our data set, I'm going to use the average. So as I type in AVE, I can say, okay, I want to use average. I can double click on that. Now I can either just type in B2 colon B25, or I could click and drag like I did with the count. Either way, I want to find the mean because remember, to find our confidence interval, the lower bound, if we go back to that, is mean minus the margin of error, and the upper bound is the mean plus the margin of error. So we have to be able to find that margin of error, and that is what Excel can help us with. So first, let's go ahead and find our standard deviation. So we're going to use StetDev, and we're going to use a sample here because this is just a sample of our life. And I'm going to click and drag. You can see it's highlighted. Again, you could use B2 colon B25. And I hit enter. So now I have some basic information. So when I look at number 1 here, find the 90% confidence interval. Okay, so for this particular one, I know that alpha is going to be 0.10 because remember, alpha is always 1 minus the percent. So 1 minus 0.9 gives me 0.10. So now I can go ahead and find the margin of error. To do that, I'm just going to type in CON and I can see confidence T. Again, I'm using T because we have a sample here. So I'm going to double click on this, and now it's going to show you, you're going to start with your alpha. Well, my alpha is 0.1, comma, the standard deviation, which is 4.30853, comma, and the sample size, 24. So you notice by having these numbers around, I can just use the cell reference and hit enter. Now that I have my margin of error, I'm going to go ahead and just put, here's my lower, here's my upper. So to find our lower end, as we mentioned, we're going to take our mean and subtract margin of error. To find the upper, we take the mean and we add the margin of error. And now we have ourselves the 90% confidence interval. So if we wanted to, I'm going to come over here and say, okay, I've got 90% goes from 5.2 to 8.2. Just going to kind of keep track over here so we can check, because we want to do a little comparison here for 95 and then also 99%. Now, one thing I want to point out, so we've done number 1, 90%. I recorded, to the nearest tenth over here on the right. If we want to change this to 95% confidence, now with 95, our alpha changes to 0.05, right? Everything else is the same. So think about this. If I go, like, you can redo the same formulas, there's nothing wrong with that. But if I go back to my margin of error for number 1, remember it's alpha, then the standard deviation and the sample size. Well, the standard deviation and the sample size are not changing. The only thing that's changing is my alpha. So if I take out my alpha and I replace it with 0.05, my margin of error and my lower, my upper automatically change. So what we just changed, we changed the confidence level, right? The 95%, so we changed alpha, it automatically updated my margin of error. And then because I used cell references for the lower and the upper, it automatically changed there as well. So that means my 95% confidence interval, again, I'm going to go to the tenths, is 4.9 and to 8.5. Okay, let's keep that same idea. If we move now to 99%, that means alpha's 0.01. So I'm going to go back up to my margin of error and my confidence interval. So again, I'm going to take out alpha, that very first one, and I'm going to replace it with 0.01. So the standard deviation, the sample size stay the same because we're using the same data set. So now that I've replaced alpha with our 0.01 because of our 99% confidence interval, when I hit enter, you can see again, it updates not just the margin of error, but also the lower and the upper pieces. So now we can go 4.2 and to the nearest tenths, 9.2. So now I have my lower and my upper, my confidence intervals. So we can compare these and we notice as we get more confident, right? So if we talk about like 1, 2, and 3, 90, 95, 99%, you can see the intervals get wider. When you're only 90% confident, you've got a smaller window because you have a greater chance of being wrong, right? I'm only 90% confident that it's going to fall between 5.2 and 8.2. But if we widen that and we make the interval bigger to 4.2 to 9.2, I can be 99% sure it's going to fall between there. And that's the idea, that these confidence intervals, the more confident you are, the larger the confidence interval is going to be because you have less room for error. So you need a bigger interval so it'll fit in there. So that's the idea. Again, for all of these, like for the 95, we could have went through and again used confidence, alpha, comma, standard deviation, comma, sample size. You can use that and then you can do again for the lower, the mean minus the sample size. So you can do this separately every time if you want. I'm just all about using the cell references to make your life easier. So that is how we can do confidence intervals using Excel.